Hi, I'm Katie Hess, Director of Sales and Marketing here at Liqui-Grow.
Hi, I'm Jake Bossenkemper, Director of Agronomy and Research here at Liqui-Grow.
And I'm John Tinsman, the Director of Procurement.
Thanks for joining us today. So we spend a lot of time talking about agronomy, and today we'd really like to focus in on some of the economics and the business side of the farming operation. So we brought in John, and John, we want to talk to you about, like you just said, procurement. What's on your desk? What are you thinking about every day, and what makes you make the decisions you do? So with that, let's kick it off and talk about some of these inputs guys work with, N, P, and K, and hear what you have to say.
Great. So nitrogen's continued to appreciate since this fall. So the farmers that bought this summer fill are probably very happy. Those prices are continuing to move up. We're seeing just recently India had a tender for urea, which is what the global nitrogen market is priced off of. And they only came up with 10% of what they needed. People didn't want to sell them large amounts of tons. So that's pushing the urea market up. Our markets are mainly in Iowa are mainly priced off of NOLA, which is New Orleans, the port of New Orleans, where people can load vessels and send them up the Mississippi to Iowa. We saw those prices jump by $20-$25 just yesterday. And we've seen UAN do that same thing at NOLA. And we're seeing that large nitrogen producers like CF are raising their UAN prices, and they're raising their ammonia prices also. So we're seeing much higher ammonia prices to the fall, or to the farmer this spring. And farmers that are going out to look for prices are probably seeing, hey, this is a lot higher than I was quoted in the fall. And we're also seeing that people that haven't bought their UAN yet, the prices are continuing to rise, and they'll be higher for side dress than what they were probably recently quoted the last couple months.
So it's kind of the same cyclical thing we see year over year as, we start off at the lowest pricing and we work our way through up into side dress season where it's going to be some higher prices.
That's right. And, I always like to encourage farmers to buy as early as possible. It's not just about trying to get your money as early as possible. The whole system is really built to incentivize that. When you think about like a manufacturing plant, they don't have humongous tanks all over as far as the eye can see to store all their product. They really want people to come in and buy early and move the product out of their tanks, out of their plant to the retail locations and to the farmers. And by being able to applicate nutrients or to prepay early so we can put the nitrogen in our tanks, but getting P and K on the ground in the fall also, just keeps all the product moving. It keeps the industry working. And the only way to do that is for, in the long run, incentivize people to buy earlier, put the nutrients on the ground earlier by giving them lower prices for the people that do in the long run. So it's not like that every year, but it's good to remember, hey, when I know what I want to do, when you've had your mind made up early, that's your biggest advantage to go and buy and try to save money in the long run. We can move on to potash.
Yeah,
maybe?
that's great.
So potash, I guess while we're still on nitrogen, ATS is made 120026.
Which is our ammonium thiosulfate,
Yes.
the sulfur source that we use.
Yes, and ammonium, yes, that's right. It's made from ammonia. So when you see ammonia prices going up, you know that ATS prices are going up also. Sulfur prices, that actually comes out of like oil refineries in Chicago for us. Those prices are moving up as well. So we will see higher ATS prices this spring than we saw in the fall.
Okay, John, so let's move on to potash or potassium and the nutrient that we talk about a lot. So how does that look on your desk these days?
So potash has fallen slightly, or it's remained about the same depending on where you're getting the pricing from. So on the wholesale market. That being said, we haven't had a winter fill yet. Winter fill is when those large Canadian miners offer pricing to people in Iowa like us that then eventually sell it to the farmer. So we haven't gotten winter pricing yet. That's expected to either be the same as it was in fall or be slightly cheaper. So both of those things would be good for the farmer.
And
not
that's
having
for
that
like
price appreciate.
spring applied, or is that
that would
next
be for
summer?
that would be for spring applied.
Okay.
And Russia and Belarus are saying they would like to cut production. They don't think potash prices are high enough. But that being said, there's a very new large mine coming online in Canada in 2026. And I think that means because of all this new production coming online that's going to make up 10 or 15% of the world's production, that to me, the most common sense thing you can do is produce as much as you can now and sell it all and make sure you end the year with no inventory. So I think that the potash producers, including Russia and Belarus, it would be unwise to try to cut production to raise prices right now. That being said, Potash and phosphates, for that matter, are both highly exposed because we do not make most of these things in the U.S. Highly exposed to tariffs that the Trump administration has proposed, and a 25% tariff on potash coming into the U.S. would result in potash maybe being almost $100 higher.
Right.
So, and that could come, any day. It could come January 20th before the product's been shipped into the U.S. So it's hard to say exactly what will happen there.
So how about, let's see, we did phosphorus then.
Yes, phosphorus. So phosphates are holding fairly steady. A lot of our MAP and DAP is imported from places like Morocco and Russia and such. And so those prices are about the same as they were late fall. Now, they were cheaper in early fall. In late fall, as farmers probably know, the prices came up, and they haven't really moved since then. However, the liquid phosphates that are made in the U.S., where there's mines that have been hit by multiple hurricanes this fall, there's been some production that has been taken offline for the year. And so I think what that ultimately means is that the liquid phosphates for things like starters are appreciating a little bit more than what the dry phosphate is.
But starters are used at such a low rate, even though they are going up, it's not going to be a huge hit to your fall.
And they do go up every year,
cyclically, kind of.
Cyclically, right. Similar to as UAN does.
Are there only so many are there only so many tons of starter made every year? Or is it unlimited supply when it comes to starter?
No, the phosphates in general, whether it's for MAP or DAP or, for starters, right, that's a liquid phosphate. Those are, there's limited mines really in the whole world, and phosphates are in short supply generally. I think it's one of the reasons why there's some people that are really pushing these new products like MES or S10 or whatever. And really it's all about trying to lower the phosphate content that's in the fertilizer, which really is not good if you want phosphate in your soil, but they're trying to stretch that phosphate rock, which is in short supply, as far as they can.
Okay, great to know. So John, switching out of the fertilizer markets, what's the next thing on your desk that, you're watching all the time and that you're watching right now?
Well, the whole macroeconomic picture is always very important. So what's happening in our economy, what's happening in consumption, what's happening in the new administration, what's happening with interest rates. So we can touch on all those.
And to give the folks at home a little example, I know this about John, that he's thinking about these things, because he'll walk by my desk and he'll say, well, have you thought about this lately? You should probably do it. And then off he walks again. And I'm like, okay, I guess I should probably think about that too, which I appreciate, But I know he's always watching all these different screens and markets. So let's dive into some of that right now.
Yeah, you do have some of the biggest desktop monitors I've ever seen.
I don't want to watch that. Well, I also, in addition to this, I run an ETF, so I like to trade. But interest rates, everybody likes to talk about interest rates. That we've seen the federal fund lower the federal funds rate, which is the rate that the Fed loans to banks overnight, and kind of sets the base of interest rates in the U.S. We've seen that fall. Now there's been multiple rate cuts. It's coming down to like 4%. So that's a good thing. That's going to lower borrowing costs. At the same time, we've seen a lot of people borrowing. Their rates really haven't changed a lot. Maybe they got lowered by 0.5 percentage point. Maybe they didn't get lowered at all. And as in mortgage rates, they've actually gone up. So what the heck's happening there? We have the Fed cutting rates, and a lot of people are actually maybe paying higher rates than they would have, a couple months ago. It's a hard one to describe, but there's the expectation, I think, that if we don't get our budget in order, that inflation's going to go back up, and people don't want to make loans if they think inflation's coming back up and the Fed's going to stop cutting. So there is a concern that that maybe employment is too strong, and the economy could overheat again. There's a concern that inflation will go back high, and obviously, if you print money, that causes inflation. If you don't run a balanced budget, that causes inflation. And right now, I think the deficit is just humongous, right? And it just keeps growing by trillions of dollars every year. So that causes inflation, and those concerns are true. Hopefully the new administration comes in and runs a better balanced budget. That would push inflation lower, and I think these borrowing costs would fall a lot at that point. I would really hope that in the long run, things come back to like 4% or even like 2%, like we saw in some mortgages back in like 2020. So
Yeah, that was great. I took advantage of that.
yeah, me too. And like when you think about it, right? If there's not a lot of inflation, and if there's not a lot of inflation, there really shouldn't be very high borrowing rates, right? I mean, you want to keep borrowing rates low so that your economy can grow a lot. People that want to start businesses can start them. They don't have. There's not a really high barrier to do it, and they can innovate and bring new products to the U.S. And people like farmers, they don't have. They're not just giving all their profit to the bank. Instead, they're getting to keep a lot of it in their own pocket. So I mean, I think, and same with people that pay mortgages and everything. So. Hopefully we see that going down, but at the end of the day, the biggest thing behind that is probably going to be what the budget deficit is, in my opinion, in the United States.
And so a lot could happen, of course, but generally speaking, we're continuing to see interest rates trend downward.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the market doesn't expect a lot of cuts from the Fed in 2025. I personally expect more than I think the market expects, and I think I think we'll see what happens there. But obviously, if the Fed cuts more than people expected, we'll see borrowing costs fall a lot more to everybody.
Okay, so let's move on to some markets. On the bean side, there's some bearish activity going on, such as the crop in South America looks okay right at the moment.
China's not buying anything.
China's not buying anything. There's this talk of trade or tariffs that could happen with this new administration, and the price of soybeans just isn't really that great. So we see where the anticipated corn acres that should come out tomorrow on the WASDE report. This is being filmed on January 9th. For all of you watching today, the WASDE report should be coming out tomorrow. So, prior to that, but there's some bearish stuff saying that maybe there's going to be less soybean acres planted in the United States this coming year and more corn acres. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think that based on how you do the math, you could make more money in certain scenarios planting corn and by quite a bit more,
And we're talking probably the Liqui-Grow territory at that, because
Right.
when we run the numbers, we run
Yeah.
them with like our yields around here.
Mm-hmm. But $100 more an acre, so it's larger than it was. That spread is larger than it was in 2023 when we planted 94 million acres. There's a possibility, I think, and I think a lot of people are talking about this, that, the spread is large enough that, it was this large, I think, in 2016. And in that year, I think we planted 94 million acres too. So do we go back to 94 million acres? I think it's a possibility. And if it does, that'll mean higher demand for fertilizer, for, certain chemicals, things like that. And it's definitely a very strong possibility.
Yeah, there's been some buzz out in the countryside about the intention to plant more corn acres, and a lot of discussions and rumblings about is corn more profitable. And like John suggested, there are some historical numbers that would suggest that it could be. When I think about this, though, I think about our geographies and our Liqui-Grow territory.
So we, just for the folks at home, we do run pretty much from Minnesota to Missouri, and then, probably from 35 east, and then we are in Illinois as well, outside the Quad Cities.
Yeah. So I think about our geography where they have a tough time continuously, year over year, growing good soybeans. Like up in north central Iowa, there's some high pH soils up there. Growing season's a little bit shorter. It can be a little tougher to consistently grow good soybeans. Even down here toward the Quad Cities, we've got some sandy pockets that it's just tough to grow good soybeans without irrigation, and corn in some cases, but even tougher to grow consistently good soybeans in those geographies. I think where farmers generally have a tough time consistently growing good soybeans, they will plant more corn in those geographies. That would be what I would have to say.
And I talked to our seed department a little bit ago, and they confirmed that we are seeing more of a trend towards corn on our buying side this year.
Yeah. So indications are there's going to be more corn planted. And what I would have to say about that, agronomically speaking, is, that suggests to me that there might be some folks that are going to plant continuous corn that maybe don't often plant continuous corn. And you really have to remember there are some agronomic things that you need to be thinking about, because the idea is if you're going to grow continuous corn, you want good continuous corn. That's the way to make continuous corn more profitable. If you have a 50 bushel yield loss because you're growing continuous corn, well, that didn't help you at all, right? So the things you really got to be thinking about are you're just going to have to apply more nitrogen to continuous corn. And I actually looked at some numbers here with the current corn nitrogen prices. So in southeast Iowa, in the southeast Iowa geography, if you use the MRNT, the maximum return to nitrogen calculator, here in southeast Iowa, it's suggesting that you need about 165 pounds of N to produce the economic optimum N rate. But continuous corn, you need about 210 pounds in. That's a lot more. That's a difference of 45 pounds of nitrogen. And just historically, when I talk to farmers, oftentimes folks think, well, you need 20 more pounds in, 25 more pounds in if you're going to go continuous corn. No, it's actually more than that. It's actually quite a bit more than that. This is suggesting 45 pounds. In the north central part of the state, you're looking at a difference of about 30 pounds of N per acre. So you need 30 more pounds of N if you're going to go continuous corn than if you're going to rotate with soybeans.
So we'll throw that link down in the comments so you guys can all get to that website. He's talked about it for many years now.
Yep. MRNT.
MRNT, okay. My dad's initials are MRT, so I get that
Okay,
backwards every
gotcha.
time.
Maximum return to nitrogen calculator.
Right.
Okay.
Did you get what you wanted to say in?
Well, there's a lot more I could say about
Okay, well,
that,
it's not about you today.
Okay.
So, John, let's get back to what you a little bit more. What else is on your desk? What are you thinking about right now as you're making decisions for Liqui-Grow on the procurement side?
I think that we saw, definitely some places in central Iowa where people are cutting back on the P&K. So we're wondering, right, are they going to put it on in the spring? So some of these people have chosen to reduce their rates in P&K, and we don't always have a good idea. It's possible that they delayed that application until spring. So you might have farmers that said, hey, I want to hold on to the cash in my operation. I don't want to do this in fall. Jake, what would you say to the people that are still trying to decide what rate they should actually put on their ground?
That's a great question.
I see what you're saying, though, because you kind of want to get through tax season. You want to see what your costs are through all of that, and whatever's left over, now we can apply some of that towards this 25 inputs. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, John. So Katie and I kind of this fall, before we really got ramped up in applying fertilizer, we made an entire video on making smart decisions around, applying P&K. Like, when is it absolutely necessary and when is it not necessary? When can you cut? When could you cut back? There are places, if you have high enough soil test levels, you can. But there are other places where you absolutely can't. So I think it's a continued conversation about if you didn't apply P&K in the fall, was that a good idea or wasn't that a good idea? And maybe we can link that video.
We can link
back,
it in the comments, yep.
because there's way too much to get into regarding that. But just generally speaking, you gotta make smart agronomic decisions. You can make really terrible decisions when corn's $6 and still make money. But you can't make terrible decisions right now and make money, for sure. So it's really important you understand the agronomics, understand where your soil test levels are at, and talk with your agronomy field advisor to help get those decisions made, for sure.
Yep. So, John, let's talk a little bit about Brazil and the Latin American markets. Is there anything that you foresee or that you're watching right now as the growing season's going on down there, or even on the business economic side?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of political dysfunction going on in Brazil right now. And that affects from their infrastructure to people, wanting to pay a lot of money to put product in place in a country that they're worried about, being able to get it to the farmer. So all that could affect, the acres they plant. All that could affect their yields. And it's very uncertain, right? What the actual effect will be. But there's some people saying, hey, we can't rely on increased acres planted anymore from Brazil. In fact, we think it might go backwards. So that would be good for the Iowa farmers, meaning that there'd be a little less supply in the world. And the Iowa farmer could come in and fill that and get higher prices for their product. At the same time, there's an El Nino year, which means there's a little bit more dryness than usual in Brazil and Argentina. So both of that could impact their crop yield as well at the same time. So I'd say both of those are good, positive factors working in our favor right now. That being said, it's really early to say whether that will come true.
I brought up SAF a little bit ago. Let's maybe hit that topic. Is there anything that you guys have heard about SAF lately, or are we just kind of waiting for this new administration to take over to hear more on SAF? And the Z?
I am 45Z. I am by no means an expert, but my current understanding is that there's a lot of things on hold until the new administration takes over.
Well, we'll be back in February with more of an update on all of this, right?
Oh, that'll be fun.
Well, that's
Let's know more.
exactly why we're going to go to the to the Iowa Renewable Fuels Conference in February.
Who's
Katie,
we?
right?
Am I
Did you,
going
you didn't
to?
sign up?
I don't know.
I thought you said you loved
when you
that
said we, I
conference.
was like, shoot,
I
this
figured
must
you
be
said
an
you were going.
Yes, I'll go. It's fine.
I'm going.
Okay, guys, so we don't have all day to talk about this, but we all have offices fairly close to each other, and so we do spend a lot of time, mingling back and forth about what's going on. And
Some
so
days I
John,
wish my office was further from yours.
well, at least you have an office. You stole mine, and now I'm in a cube.
You do have a very nice office. In fact, you face the golf course, and I
I know.
face like another
Yeah.
office building. Somehow that worked out really well for each other. I'm happy for you.
Little insider information. We continually move office spaces around here. It keeps everybody on their toes. It's great.
Yeah, it could change tomorrow.
And I think there's talks of that. But what I was trying to get to is that, we have to go back and forth. And so Jake, after you hear this information from John, what are you thinking about? Margins are a little tighter. Inputs aren't coming down quite as fast as we'd like them to. Prices are not, the highest they've ever been. So.
Well, Katie, it always comes back to producing the most corn you can for the lowest input cost, right? And
You're
I
right.
hate to say that, but it always comes back to that. And when corn's $6 and soybeans are $16, none of that really matters. But when corn and soybeans are where they are, it does matter. And
It's definitely a bushels game.
we need the bushels, but we have to be smart about how we get the bushels. And I'm just going to give you a couple examples. This year, we had a lot of rain. We were suggesting that we're going to have a lot of disease and you need a fungicide. And in a lot of cases, that was absolutely the case. I know a bunch of farmers that do really good trials, and we ended up having, generally speaking, from what I've seen, very good responses to fungicide in corn and soybean in 24. So
One
it's a
way
good
we-
thing you did it.
One
okay?
way you could kind of cut on your cost there too, look to see, but you could pay for your fungicide now and not wait till in season, get that better price if you've got the money sitting around.
Yep, that's one way you could save some money. The second way you could save some money is thinking really hard about, is this a black and white decision? Do I spray every corn acre or do I not spray? That's not necessarily the way to think about it, right?
And our agronomy field advisors are there to help you make those decisions locally.
Absolutely. And so I'm just going to give an example. You've got no-till, HEL ground. You've got to no-till that ground. Well, guess what? That's where disease is more likely to be. That's one way you could help make a fungicide decision, right? So talk to the local agronomy field advisors about how you make smart fungicide decisions. We already talked about P&K. Where you need P&K, you have to have it to be profitable and to have the yield. Where you don't, this might be a year to think about cutting in some places where you can. But you better be certain you can, and that's where you would also want to talk to the local agronomy field advisor. You could go on and on and on about the factors involved in making smart agronomic decisions. And I would also argue, this is when it's most important to be close to your agronomic field advisor at our location and talk to them about these decisions, because now it's more critical than ever.
Sure. Are there any last comments you'd like to make, John, as we sign off on this Lead Academy?
No, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lead Academy.
Liqui-Grow
Excellent.
And agronomy
development.